name's Greg Knox, and welcome to the show. So I'm here to discuss, because it's the end of 2016, films that have come out in 2016. I'm here with Maria Fend. How's it going?
Greg.
Right, so we've had quite a lot of films come out this year. In general terms, would you say that this year has been a good year for horror?
I'd say good. Like, not amazing, but I have seen some fine examples this year that have stood out.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about now, is to talk about some good examples and some bad examples of films that came out in 2016. So let's start with a film that came out right at the beginning of 2016. Now, some people might not classify this as a horror film, and that's fine. I'm actually one of them, but I did want to talk about it on the show anyway, and that's 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah, I did see that one.
Okay, so what did you think of 10 Cloverfield Lane? Did you think, because I know people who are really huge fans of Cloverfield, and this sort of came out of left field, because it's like no one knew that this sequel was happening. They managed to keep it really, really under wraps. They only announced it, I think, a month before it even came out. So, what did you think?
It's probably verging more on sci-fi, I would say.
Yeah, it's a sci-fi sort of thriller.
On IMDb, it's classified as an action horror sci-fi. So yeah, that does fit. It doesn't so much feel like horror, but there's enough of the element of horror in there to get me interested enough to watch this.
Okay, because you don't really watch non-horror films, do you?
Not very many. I do enjoy watching horror more than anything else, so occasionally I'll watch something that isn't horror, but not very often.
Is there like a line that like you go, well, this isn't really horror enough, so you won't watch it?
No, it's just anything that grabs my attention, really, but that always seems to be horror at the moment. So
okay. I really enjoyed this one. What did you think of the last 10 minutes? Because the last sort of 10 or 15 minutes are quite polarizing. There are some people who kind of, with a lot of these films, like when you've got a slow build, like the first kind of 2 acts of the film are, will obviously build up the tension, and then what happens in the third act is kind of what, people will either get behind it or not get behind it. Like, for example, a film that I can think of, House of the Devil by Ty West. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that one. That's
a really good film. You should see it. But anyway, that's kind of the sort of film I'm talking about, where you've got the slow build and you're not really sure what's going on, and you've got mystery elements. I like films that have mystery to them.
Yeah. And
that then, like, when things do hit the fan, the shit really hits the fan. And I think this is kind of like that. So, but anyway, what did you think of the last sort of 10 or 15 minutes of this particular film?
This film isn't rated as highly on my list for 2016 as some other films. It was I preferred the first Cloverfield movie. I liked John Goodman in this film. I did think he was very creepy, and I thought the ending was fitting. Like, I can see why they did it, but I don't know if it was kind of like confusing and like intense, and maybe slightly disappointing in a way that they just concluded it in that sense.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's a high budget film with lots of special effects, so they were flexing that muscle. So I can see why they did it.
Do you think if it wasn't a Cloverfield film that it would be different? Because to be honest, it only has one very, very tenuous link with the first film. So I think they could have quite easily just released this as just, standalone film.
Yeah, I agree. It could have been, but maybe they wouldn't have got as many people interested. I'm not sure. It's possible that until they like really sort of got to work on that, they didn't actually know themselves how it was going to end, because it did seem, quite sort of open until that point. Anything could have happened,
Yeah, I did like kind of those elements. I mean, the ending, I don't know, it could have gone either way. I don't really have a strong opinion on the ending one way or the other. I can see why they did it, but I don't know, maybe it would have been better with a slightly more ambiguous ending, because I'm not one of these people where, like, you must know people like this. When you watch a film, they want all the answers right away.
they want everything explaining, and you don't necessarily need that, do you? You quite
Exactly.
like it being left open.
I mean, one of my favourite directors is David Lynch, so that kind of says it all, really. It's like sometimes you don't necessarily need to have everything explained to you.
I think hence my comment about it being disappointing. I think like when it was explained, it was kind of not maybe as good as my imagination was speculating. And I don't know what it was that I was expecting to happen, but it was like all the build up was kind of over when it got to that point, and then that's why I felt disappointed. But it's a solid film. It's just not one of those films that I would like sort of recommend to lots of people or watch numerous times. For me, it was like a one-off thing, and it was okay, you know.
Okay. I mean, similarly, like in its marketing, where you had a film that was originally marketed as one film, and then it actually turned out to be another film entirely, we have Blair Witch, directed by Adam Wingard, who I am a huge fan of. I'm a huge fan of The Guest. I'm a huge fan of You're Next. So I haven't actually seen Blair Witch. It is sort of on my kind of films to watch very soon. Now, this has not had a very good reception. I know you've seen the film. What did you think?
Yeah, I did. I went to the cinema to see this one. I thought again it was okay. You know, it's okay for like an evening out. It sort of ticks the boxes. It does exactly as you expect. But for me, that again, that's a little bit disappointing. It felt like deja vu. Like it felt really similar.
Yeah, I've heard it is basically the same as the original film, except just with better equipment.
Yeah, it technically it was, and there was quite a bit of build up. You know, it did sort of make me jump a few times, which is kind of cool. Like that's part of the experience. But I didn't feel that it was like, you know, solid enough film to sort of like you didn't really gain anything from it. It was just like you were sort of taken along for the ride for a bit, which was kind of cool. But it did feel like just deja vu of like the original. So I was a little disappointed that it wasn't more original. But it did everything that I expected. So you can't really complain like when it's labeled as, you know, it's similar to the original, because it really is. So
Okay. I mean, I've heard this film has, I wouldn't say it's been spoiled to me as such, because I haven't seen it, but I from what I understand, it is basically the same as the original, the same kind of plot. It's very kind of found footagey, as in it's got all those kind of tropes, like lots of jump scary bits, which I'm not really a fan of, honestly. And what they've tried to do is they've tried to explain kind of the way I look, from my understanding, is it's kind of similar to have you seen Wreck?
yeah,
That's a great film, isn't it?
Yeah, much prefer Wreck. I mean, I'm kind of over found footage a little bit now, but I still really like Wreck.
Oh, okay. I'm way over found footage. I was way over found footage of Wreck a long time ago. But it's like if you compare Wreck to, have you seen Wreck 2?
I think I've seen it. It's been a long time, so I'm not sure.
It's basically it's like a direct sequel to that. It's the same style. I think it's even the same director. It's like the same actors who survived the original. But what they did in Rec 2 was, where the first one you didn't really know what was going on, in the second one they tried to give an explanation for it, and a more supernatural explanation, and it really, really fucked up the film.
Oh, okay.
That's my opinion. But if I feel that from what I've heard about this film, they've done the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think they tried to explain it, but it really does end up just being very similar to the original.
Okay, so I will hate watch that. I will watch it but not enjoy myself.
Okay,
as best I can.
Yeah, you should do that. It's not going to change your life. I'll confirm that.
No. But the good thing about horror films is most of the time they're really short. So most horror films are like 80 minutes long. I don't think you should go over 80 or 90 minutes unless you really have to. But that didn't stop James Wan in The Conjuring 2, which also came out this year. What did you think of The Conjuring 2?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. How long is that film?
It's, I think, with the credits, it's, I think, 2 hours and 5 minutes or 2 hours and 10 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, I have to say, because I watched this at the cinema, and I was really looking forward to it because I like the first one, and Yeah, I'd rate this quite highly actually. I think as well because it was based in North London, which is where I live. I quite like that connection. I liked the fact that it was based on like a true story, which was, is fairly sort of connected to a lot of really strange things that did actually happen genuinely. Which, they could have speculated that it was from this paranormal, activity or paranormal beings. It could be wrong, but it is based on a lot of like weird happenings which did actually really happen. So I quite like that it's based on some truth, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm harping on the fact it's long. It didn't actually feel that long. I did enjoy it for like a mainstream kind of horror film. I don't think it was like the best film I've ever seen or anything like that. I thought I don't know if it was necessarily better than the first one. I did think like the way the story played out was very similar to the first one, admittedly, because it's the same kind of, it's the Warrens again. So you've got Patrick Wilson, you've got Vera Farmiga again. Obviously, there wasn't any. Well, I was slightly surprised that James Wan film doesn't have any creepy dolls in it.
Yeah, instead he had the creepy nun, which I guess was a good move. It's something different, and not really seen that much in other horror movies. So he's picked up on just, creating something new in a way. I mean, it's all very much a cliche. We can't really see anything that new these days. Everything's just kind of being recycled. But I do like to think that he's been fairly original with that concept and with the film. I think I preferred this one to the first one, I think I liked the possession, and the crucifixes, and just the fact that it was based on that true story. And I think you mentioned the end credits to me. I really liked the element of sort of showing what it was based on right at the end. That was really cool.
Yeah, they did try and make like the characters in the film look exactly like, their real life counterparts, although obviously the Warrens are much more glamorous in the film than they were in real life.
Yeah, for sure.
But like, no, I gotta say I enjoyed it. I think the Conjuring films are. I do kind of, now that James Wan has done, like, because obviously when he started he did Saw, and then he's moved on and he's done stuff like Insidious. And to be honest, the Conjuring films and the Insidious films are not that dissimilar from each other, really, if you think about it, because they're to do with supernatural beings and it haunting like families, things like that. And
it does feel very similar to the point where I actually get the sort of storylines mixed up.
Yeah, although I suppose the demon in this doesn't look like Darth Maul and the demon in Insidious does. That's kind of how I kind of sort of get them. Sort of. One thing I've got to be honest, sometimes like I did find the Cockney accents a little bit sort of it was slightly sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but like I did find that the spirit, when he was speaking through the little girl, he did sound like the Hitcher from Mighty Boosh.
A little bit. I thought that guy was really creepy, so I really liked that element of it. It was so much creepier than the creepy nun. I think it was the chair, and just the fact that he was like sat in that chair and you couldn't see him like half the time. So it was so dark. So again, it's like coming back to what we say, what we can't see. It's like what you imagine would be there. It's like more scary than actually seeing it. So when you see the nun kind of come out of the painting or like various parts at the end, it's almost like there's been all this build up and then you finally see like what the spirit is. So for me, I think the old guy in the chair was like much scarier than the actual sort of creepy nun. Because he was like the Enfield poltergeist, wasn't he? That was the voice.
Yeah,
that's what it was based on.
It's actually it's quite interesting actually, because I'm thinking like, is this kind of like now, because we've had like all these different movements in horror. So we had torture porn, then we have found footage, and now I guess we've got these kind of films, because you've got Lights Out, which is again kind of very similar to this and Insidious. I think I haven't seen it, but is the new Ouija film, is that similar again? Is this sort of some kind of poltergeist kind of haunting a family, essentially?
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities to The Conjuring 2 and Ouija. this year, and I really enjoyed both of them actually. And yeah, possession film seems to be like the big deal at the moment, and that's the route everybody's going down. And I have to say, I really enjoyed both of those, and it did feel quite novel. There was a similarity as well with like where they've gone back to like, so I think with Ouija that was back to the 60s, I think, and then Conjuring 2 is in the 70s, so the whole film is shot with that style in mind, and like they really do a good job of like placing everything, which does make it sort of feel like you are actually back in that era. And back then they did sort of put more weight into these sort of like demonic possessions and witch hunts and things like that. So people, they really strongly believed it. So it's like going back to that time, whereas I think like now in the modern day, it's all like people just assume it's made up for movies.
And you can't, obviously, because it's set in the past, you can't get away with kind of like, oh, I've got no signal.
Yeah, and it's just so much more believable set in that time, but it's also incredible like how they managed to keep the whole style running throughout, and they've got like cars and props and clothing. It does make it feel like really kind of sort of spooky and quaint, and just has a particular look to it, that style. So I like that they've paid attention to details with that in both films. So a lot of similarities, and I think that level of detail like does make the movie for me.
I mean, another film, it's a similar story. It's set in a period or anything like that, but you've got Under the Shadow, which is a UK film. It's in Farsi, and it was actually our nomination for the Best Foreign Language Oscar. Now, unfortunately, it hasn't made the final cut, which is a bit disappointing. But again, it's another film, and it's kind of got a similar story almost in a way to The Babadook, where you've got a mother and daughter, and it's set in Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. Now, what I liked about this is, compared to something like Insidious or The Conjuring, you never actually see the ghost, the spirit, but it's there. I mean, it's definitely there, and spooky shit definitely does happen. Spoiler, everyone. But one thing I did like about it is because you can't see it, you almost have to use your imagination a bit more, if that makes sense. So that's a film I do highly recommend for those people who are not adverse to seeing films that are not in English and you have to read subtitles. Ooh, very scary. That's one that I do definitely recommend. It was actually Mark Commode's favourite film of 2016.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so if there's and he knows his horror.
Yeah.
One film that Mark Commode didn't like was actually on his worst films of the year, and a film that you and I have both seen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lump two films in together. So Rob Zombie had a new film this year called 31.
Yes.
Which I wasn't a fan of. But again, I'm not really a fan of Rob Zombie's work anyway. But also, to tie this in, is Eli Roth's film, The Green Inferno, which was, I think, originally released in I think in America it came out in I think he did it in 2013 or 2014. It finally came out this year. And I've got to say, I'm not a fan of either director. I think they both have a lot of knowledge of horror. They're probably great people to talk to about horror films. They probably have really good taste in film, like horror films, but I've got to be honest, I'm not a fan of their work, and I think these two films are admittedly 10 years past the height of both of their popularity, and I just kind of don't really see kind of where either one of them will go. Although Eli Roth, apparently the next film he's making is a remake of Death Wish, which will be terrible.
Oh, okay.
It's supposed to star Bruce Willis, and Bruce Willis does not give a fuck anymore about anything. He's got to Robert De Niro stage of just putting himself in any old shit now. But anyway, so I was not a fan of either of those films.
Well, I like both. This is always the case, isn't it, when we have a discussion? I think I prefer Green Inferno, which is strange for me because I'm a huge Rob Zombie fan. So I pretty much like anything that he does because I like his style. So for me, I enjoyed 31. After I came out of the cinema after watching that, amongst a group of friends, there was great debate about whether it was a good film or not. And I've had this debate and discussion with so many people who didn't like 31. And I'm like standing up for Rob Zombie, basically. I got I got a kick out of watching that movie. I like his style. I think he's doing something fairly different. I like that he writes the music for it. I like watching Sherry Moon Zombie in films.
Okay.
Contrary to what a lot of people say. Yeah, I think I liked the fact that there were clowns and chainsaws in the movie, and did it for me. I would possibly buy this on DVD. Like, I really liked it. I can see why people didn't like the storyline or didn't think it had enough of a storyline to sort of give it value. But I don't think that's his strength. I think the style that he directs is his strength. And it's got that kind of, very DIY sort of, heavy metal sort of grindhouse vibes to it. So yeah, I like it. I like it. It was very much like Purge meets Running Man meets House of a Thousand.
It is very similar to a Running Man. I've got to be honest. The story is very, very similar.
Yeah. It was like a combination of those three things. For anybody who hasn't seen it, I enjoyed it. Green Inferno, I really did like that. I thought it was pretty harsh, like in a good way, like quite shocking. Although there were some moments where the humor got a little bit too cheesy for me.
Yeah, like the scene where that girl gets diarrhea when they're in the cage. It's like, come on, that was not necessary.
Yeah, and where they basically all get stoned and then they get the munchies.
Yeah, I mean, come on, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I wanted it to stay.
That's not even how it works. They're like, who gets stoned? Like, you've got this. So, just for anyone who hasn't seen the film, there's a scene where essentially, so you've got these really annoying people, like all people in Eli Roth films, are basically these people who are activists, and essentially they get captured by cannibals, and one of them happens to have a big bag of weed on them, as you do. And so what they do is these cannibals have...
What else would you have on you,
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, fuck it, I'll just bring like this weed with me. Great.
That's what I always take with me on a flight. It's not going to go wrong at all.
Exactly. Yeah, get it through customs, no problem. But yeah, like lost my train of thought. But yeah, they have this big oven for cooking people, I guess, as you do. Guess a cannibal would need to cook like a person. You're not going to just eat them raw, are you? But yeah, so their idea is to put this big bag of weed in a corpse. And they put the corpse in the oven, and then they all get sort of secondhand stoned, which literally the whole tribe gets secondhand stoned. Like, even people who are stood like really far away from the oven get secondhand stoned. It's like, that's not what happens.
I know, and it's like I was enjoying this as a serious, like, cannibal, film. Serious. It's like
enjoying it
shocking.
For its allegorical content.
Yeah, and then they kind of ruined it with this, like, sort of cheesy, humor element. And when I was watching this film, I was like, I'm going to choose to ignore that section. And I'm going to keep on watching it for the serious cannibal film that it is.
Yeah, exactly. You were more interested in the plight of the main character who becomes an activist. Like, literally start the film, no interest in activism. 10 minutes later, suddenly wants to be a massive activist. Like, that's obviously how it happens in real life. Yeah, as you can tell, I really, really did not like this.
Yeah, you're a harsher critic than I am. I'm quite more laid back.
That is very readily apparent, I would say. Very readily apparent.
But that's good because, like, this is why it's gonna, be a balanced discussion about it.
Okay.
Would
you buy the Green Inferno on DVD?
No.
Well, there you go. So obviously you couldn't have liked it that much.
Yeah, and I think my dedication to Rob Zombie is what makes me want to buy 31. From like a collector's point of view, and because I could watch it again. I found it enjoyable to watch, so I'd watch it again. Whereas Green Inferno, I liked it. I thought it stood up in terms of horror movies this year. I especially liked the idea, and I was open to a new cannibal movie because they're always they're always shocking. Let's face it, that topic of conversation, it can't not be. So yeah, for me, I liked it, but then I don't think I could watch those parts of it that irritated me, that felt like it ruined it a little bit again, like the humorous bits. I think if I watched it again, I would be more annoyed the second time around.
Probably, yeah. I don't see it being a 2-watch film.
Yeah, so there we go. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thought in terms of the general view of like horror fans throughout the year, I think that would be higher up on the list than 31. But if I had to purchase a DVD, I would definitely purchase 31.
Do you think, I mean, this is the last kind of thing I want to say on the matter. Do you think that, because Eli Roth doesn't seem to have grown up at all, but I thought with Rob Zombie, admittedly, I say this not as a fan of his films, but I have seen House of a Thousand Corpses, I have seen The Devil's Rejects, and in fairness, the previous film he made, Lords of Salem, I felt was more mature. So, yes, he still had certain traits in that film that kind of annoyed me. And yes, the main character was played by his wife again. But I felt that it was going a slightly more mature direction. So one of the problems I have with 31 is some of the stuff the characters, all the characters really, they come out with just... I'm not a prude by any stretch of the imagination, but they come out with these really, really awful things, and they say like almost the most vile, disgusting things you could think of, and it's for no reason other than shock value.
Yeah, I don't mind that, and I think.
No, don't get me wrong, I don't mind it either. It doesn't offend me. I'm not, oh my god, I'm so offended by this, but it's just like really, like I don't know. I just felt like I thought he kind of moved on from this, and it's like he's just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think I quite like that in his styling. I think with Lords of Salem, I liked them for different reasons. Like I like Lords of Salem as well. I think with 31, he thought the plot through more. Like he'd kind of gone more down that route. Whereas Lords of Salem was more stylistically, like it was, like you say, it was more mature. It was like different. But I think a lot of people didn't appreciate that, so he's not gone down that route again.
I heard with 31 he actually had trouble financing this film. This is something that I've heard through the grapevine.
Yeah, he spent an awful lot of money on it. So it wasn't like, it was low budget. It was an expensive film to make, but he did crowdfund it. So I guess some people had input into how he would develop it. But it's so different to Lords of Salem. But I like them both for different reasons. I think, like I say, 31, the plot is stronger, and with Lords of Salem, stylistically, it was stronger, like visually.
Okay. On that sort of similar note, another film which came out this year, which is very visually striking and is very divisive, is The Neon Demon by Nicholas Winding Refn. I really enjoyed this film. I'm one of the few people who enjoyed Only God Forgives. A lot of people hate that film. That's probably the most divisive film of recent times, because people either really, really love it or they absolutely despise it. I fall on the love it sort of camp. And I think with that film, I think people were expecting a film which is like Drive, which is actually very un-Nicholas Winding Refn-like. I think if you look at the entire oeuvre of Nicholas Winding Refn, I think this film and Only God Forgives are more similar to the kind of films that he normally makes. And I mean, visually, this film is like absolutely amazing. I love kind of films visually like this with all the very striking primary colours. What did you think?
I haven't seen his other films, but I'd heard very good things about Neon Demon, and lots of people had recommended it and said that it's the kind of film that I would enjoy. So I went to see this, and yeah, it's shot beautifully. Like, being like, I'm really into visual films myself, especially being a graphic designer. So like the colours and the way it was shot was just amazing. I loved that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I didn't think it felt so much like a horror movie as
No,
such.
I wouldn't necessarily classify this as a horror film, in all honesty, but it has kind of come up on a lot of kind of horror sort of end of year lists, so I felt it's probably worth including just for that reason alone.
Yeah, it's detailed actually as a horror thriller on IMDb, and many reviewers and critics would detail it as psychological horror, and it is really. But for some reason, I don't think of it as like an out and out horror film. But I really
Hmm.
enjoyed it. I liked the story. I liked the insight into sort of modeling in LA and generally just that scene in LA, which fascinates me.
As a model yourself, is the modelling world in the Neon Demon? Is it how realistic? Well, gonna say how realistic, considering some of the things that happen. Obviously, it's probably not that realistic, but I'm assuming necrophilia doesn't happen in the modelling world as much as is maybe depicted in this. But I mean, how similar is it as a non-model myself?
Yeah, it's obviously highly exaggerated, this movie, but the thoughts that they based the storyline of like drama in modeling, and the fact that she's really young, she's underage, and she's kind of naive, and that's like in the world of supermodels, and especially probably in LA, like those are things that would really happen, that somebody really young would get into that. And there's whole like drama and bitchiness and envy from other models, and competitiveness, and this is all real stuff that would happen in like high fashion and in the world of supermodels. So what it's based on is like it's kind of believable, but then he obviously exaggerates that to such a high level that it does get really far fetched. But the premise is based on something that it isn't far from the truth. So yeah, I mean, I guess it paints it in kind of a negative light, but that's the horror element of it, is just picking out those parts that could go wrong. And
Yeah, I mean,
it's also playing on the glamour, which is obviously the part that's like the part that everybody loves about that whole probably supermodel scene in LA. So he's combined those two, but he's made it go like so wrong, which is why it works as a horror movie.
my friend who I saw the film with didn't think that Ellie Fanning was attractive enough in terms of the main character. The way that the other characters kind of was talking about how beautiful she was, he didn't think she was kind of the right person in that role, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm just curious on your thoughts about it, because I know in the modelling world, what is seen as attractive is kind of very different from sort of the normal man on the street.
Yeah, I think like beauty's in the eye of the beholder, as everybody says. So I think she played the part perfectly. I can see what you mean, like what your friend says, that maybe he expected somebody kind of more like striking or astounding, because in some ways she's like quite sort of normal looking.
Yeah, she does look very normal looking.
Yeah, but I think that works for the story, is that it's everybody's opinion, or it's like everybody's perception of what she has, like without like anybody who looks kind of similar to her could have done that job or could have done those things, but it's like right place, right time, and it's just like other people's perception of like what she has, or like somebody's taste at the time. So it's like a chance thing. And I think like before I saw this movie, I expected her to kind of look sort of androgynous or like kind of alien like, which is like the stereotype of a really high class supermodel, is that they'll have like exaggerated features, or like kind of look a little bit sort of strange, but in a beautiful way, that it's like unique. So I kind of expected her to look like that. So she does look a little more ordinary than I expected, but I think she plays the part really well, and that it works for the role. So yeah, I have no complaints on that.
Hmm.
All in all, I think it's a really dark film. I like the subject matter. I like the sort of glamour and the storyline. And it does leave you feeling kind of, it does kind of freak you out to that point where psychologically at the end you can interpret it in different ways, and you're like questioning what you've just seen and what is truth and what isn't. which is what I really liked about this film. So I'd highly recommend it, and I'd go back for a second watch on this one.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a film where you need to watch it twice, and I think a lot of people have kind of dismissed it, maybe unfairly, as I know it didn't make a lot of money when it was released in America. But yeah, I agree. I say as a fan of the director, I do recommend the film quite a lot.
I actually had a friend who watched it, and he said that he really didn't get it. And then he asked me for my thoughts on the movie and a description of, why I liked it. And then he said after he'd heard that, he was going to go back for a second watch and see if he could appreciate it again, because he's really into his horror, but he couldn't get into the sort of subject matter and storyline. So it's interesting, because I think it is entirely down to your view on this film. And like I said before about detail, like there's plenty of detail in this film, and that's why you might need to watch it twice. So I'm totally agreed with you on that. But yeah, I love this movie, so it's a good one.
I just want to quickly go through the worst film that I saw this year. Now, we've talked about this before. You've seen Cabin Fever, haven't you?
Yeah, the original.
The original Cabin Fever by Eli Roth. So, someone had the bright idea of, do you remember, like, Gus Van Sant made Psycho, which is a total shot-for-shot remake? And most people went, well, what the fuck is the point of doing that? That makes no sense. Like, and it was terrible, and it got horrible reviews, and,
yeah,
people have tried desperately to forget it since. Well, someone had the great idea of doing that, but for Cabin Fever.
So the original Cabin Fever was 2002, and I went to the cinema to see that, I think.
Yes. So the original Cabin Fever isn't even 15 years old, and someone had the bright idea of doing a shot-for-shot remake, except they've cut out all the what could be described as slightly politically incorrect sections of the film. But those were the best bits of the film. The best bits of the original film, there's one kind of... I don't even know how to say it. There's a bit that happens really near the beginning of the original that involves a shopkeeper. Let's put it that way. And then what happens is it gets paid off at the end. That doesn't happen in the remake. Not at all. So that's disappointing. They got rid of the guy, the really, really annoyingly stupid, like he looked retarded, jock character who is like had a gun, is like, I'm going to shoot squirrels because they're gay. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in the remake. It's just so fucking pointless. It makes literally, like, there is literally no reason to do a new version of this film that was exactly the same, and they've taken out any slightly questionable content. It's just bland and boring, and all the people in it are just vacuous and pretty looking, and it's just terrible. It
was talked about so little that this remake has managed to escape my radar this year, so there we go.
Yeah, there you go. So
I was like, wait, they did a remake?
They did a remake of Cabin Fever.
Have I seen this?
You don't need to see this, believe me. There are plenty of awful horror films out there that it's just another one on the list. It's probably going to sort of end up just being completely forgotten in about 5 years. But I hadn't seen the original, and I heard about this, and I thought, well, if this is so bad, I have to watch it. So I watched the original, and then I watched the remake, and I mean, Eli Roth, I don't think is a particularly good director at all, but he is like Orson Welles reincarnated in comparison to the guy who directed this. So there you go.
Can we talk about my two must-see favourite films of 2016 in terms of horror?
Yeah, sure. By all means.
Bone Tomahawk and The Witch were my two. I'd say Bone Tomahawk is top of the list for me because I just thought it was incredible and so shocking. And The Witch I really enjoyed, so I'm going to put that at second.
Okay. Well, I've seen Bone Tomahawk very, very recently, and yeah, I'd agree. It's a very good film.
It's brutal. It's just like it's slowly as like a western, and you're really not sure where this is going, and you just kind of lulled into this sort of it's just kind of plodding along, this movie. and then so suddenly it just becomes incredibly shocking. And again, like with cannibal tribes, like it's another theme that sort of emerged in this and Green Inferno. But Bone Tomahawk is like there's no comedy in that whatsoever. It just entirely goes down the serious route, and it is very much believable.
Yeah, I mean, they did get some really, really good actors in this. I mean, they've got Kurt Russell, obviously, and it's
Yeah.
interesting that he did this about the same time as he did Hateful Eight, because it may as well be the same character because
Yeah.
they're very, very similar.
They are very similar, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, but not only that, obviously you've got Patrick Wilson, who's a very good actor from obviously the Conjuring films as well. But Richard Jenkins is in this. He plays the old man character, and he's very, very good as sort of character actor. And yeah, I agree with you. Like it starts off, and David Arquette's in there, which is like okay, and your man Sid Haig, who you love, I know.
Yeah, I love Sid Haig, so that's a bonus.
And yeah, I agree. It's a very slow burn for the first hour. Because not to say that it's boring, it's just some films they take their time to get going, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's like there's intrigue as to kind of where you're going in the story, as to where the destination is. Then yeah, you're allowed to take your time by all means.
Yeah, it's almost like they lull you into this false sense of security though, because you're like sort of, paying attention to the characters, and then really so suddenly it just becomes like really brutal.
And what's interesting, it's interesting that you've chosen this and The Witch, because what they both are, in a way, is they're both films that are set in period where people are using, like, language that, but no, could be, like, the language that people used at the time as well.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting bit of synchronicity there.
Yeah, no, that's really creative. It's quite a difficult thing for them to direct, I think, and it works so well. And for me, I think Bone Tomahawk, even just the name of the film and the intrigue behind that, and then when you watch it and you realize what it actually means, like that like made the film for me as well. But also just with the shock value and like some of the ways that the cannibals live and how it's so developed, like the way that they live, and there's no like they don't behave like human beings, like there's no like empathy, there's no emotion, so it's just so brutal. Like I say, absolutely no comedy element.
No, but I like this. I think with horror, there's a temptation to almost be too silly. I think one of the things about this, as you said, I mean, there's probably some black comedy in here somewhere, or some very dry comedy, maybe, but it's
maybe in terms of some of the dialogue that they have at some
of the
point.
conversations they have. If you're in the right environment, you probably would find funny, but it's not like hee hee ha ha, because that just kind of undermines the horror aspects of it. It's very, very difficult to do horror and comedy right, because tonally they're two very different things.
Yeah, and it doesn't poke fun at itself. Like
No.
it's highly serious, and like you say, like with the actors in this film, it really does sell it to you, because that's some of the best actors, and they completely fit the context, like the Western kind of context.
Absolutely. As I said, Kurt Russell in particular sporting like really impressive sort of facial hair.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
impressive, yeah.
he's excellent in this film.
Mm.
So how would you rate that? Have you got a favorite horror film?
Yeah, I mean, I would go, so in terms of my favourite, I would probably say The Witch. Of the two, I slightly prefer The Witch. I saw The Witch at the London Film Festival last year, so yeah, it was actually over a year ago since I first saw it. But what I like about it is that it's got it's very atmospheric, and not a lot of films now are atmospheric.
Yeah.
And yeah, in terms of like the horror, a lot of it is suggestion rather than actual what you see.
It's much more powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're talking, I think the theme of this is what is and what isn't a horror film. And this is one of the films that kind of has caused this debate as to, like, I've seen, like, when people talk about this film online, a lot of people say, well, I don't really consider this a horror film, which I find ridiculous personally, but it's like, clearly is a horror film. But I think because of it's more atmospheric rather than boom, sort of jump scares, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, and that goat, I mean, that goat is just haunted. He's got a name, hasn't he?
Black Phillip.
Yeah, Black Phillip. Yeah, I mean, that part alone of the movie, like, that's some talent right there.
Oh yeah, definitely. He's a very talented goat. Absolutely.
It is so atmospheric, and it's just so creepy, and it's going back to traditional witch beliefs, which again, you know, I've touched upon, like, would never be able to sort of take it seriously in a kind of a modern time. But they believed it so strongly back then that there are almost lots of things that prove that it would have been for those reasons, because they sort of engineer it that way. And like historically it's been recorded that it was down to witchcraft, like things happened due to that. So that's why it's so believable, like in the context of that era. So I just thought it was fantastic, like fantastic ideas, very, very creepy, fantastic acting. And like you say, like visuals and atmosphere, it was just brilliant, really had me on edge. So yeah, I'm gonna say Witch is like my second favourite horror film of the year, and I'm gonna put Neon Demon as number 3 actually, which we've already discussed.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to do a top 3, I would probably say The Witch would be number 1. I would say after that, I really like The Wailing. The Wailing is a Korean film. It came out here a month or so ago, but I saw it at the London Film Festival this year. And that's again, it's kind of a genre hybrid film. So it is a horror film, but it's also like a mystery, and it's a sort of police kind of procedural film. And it's also got some comedic elements in there too, because especially more near the beginning, because the main character is sort of a bumbling policeman, and you know he's very, very easy not to take seriously. But I think it kind of things as the story goes on, you do kind of you think the shit hits the fan. Let's put it that way. And I just found by the end, like, because it's a long film, again, it's like about 2.5 hours long, and by the end of it, like, it just rocks you to your very core. And I was thinking about the film, like, me and my friend who I saw it with, we were both thinking about it for days afterwards. So that's another one that I highly recommend.
It's on IMDb as drama, fantasy, horror. This one.
Okay, the IMDb, you know, it knows everything.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I always check to see like what it's categorized as, because if it is cross genre, then it's usually indicated on there. Whereas Wikipedia, you know, it's kind of open to interpretation. I guess that's just whoever will have written it. So I try to go off IMDb because it's a bit more uniform.
But it is interesting because you do have, like, I've noticed, like, with these films that we're talking about, so we've got The Wailing, which has horror elements, and you can definitely categorize as a horror film, but it's not purely a horror film. And something like, you know, The Witch, similar. Bone Tomahawk, because you said it's a lot of it is Western elements. And with the Neon Demon, it's, again, there's all these other elements in there. And there's another film which I really liked, which some people categorize as a horror film, some people don't. It's Green Room.
That was an excellent film.
Which is another great film. So performance by Anton Yelchin, who is one of the many people who died this year. Which was a big shock because he was so young. Horror. Yeah, definitely got run over by his own car. What a way to go.
Interestingly enough, that I saw like a short, I think it was like a trailer for a film. It's like a spoof trailer, but I guess it could end up being made. But it was a horror film that somebody's just put online about 2016 being evil. So It's just a horror film about the things that have really happened in 2016.
It's 2016's fault that all those people died. It's not just because they happened to die coincidentally in a 12-month period. No, it was 2016 itself. It's
Let's
cursed.
blame it on the year. And like, I think it was like physically embodied in the trailer as like a being, 2016 is actually a being, like this evil being. But it made me laugh anyway. I thought it was great. A spoof idea.
Well, there's only 8 hours to go, and then that's it. We'll never have to worry about 2016 ever again. Everything's going to be great.
What are you looking forward to in 2017? That's the big question.
Wow, I was going to ask you the same thing. So, great minds think alike and all that. From what I can see in 2017, it's unfortunately gone back to sort of how things were like 10 years ago. There seems to be a lot of sequels. There seems to be a lot of remakes. A lot of sequels to films that I wish didn't have sequels because they weren't that good the first time. Like, I'm seeing Annabelle 2. I mean, did anyone over the age of like 15 like the first Annabelle film? Probably not.
It was okay. It was a little bit disappointing in places. However, I will probably go and see Annabelle 2, but I would wish that they'd made something different and more creative.
Well, there you go. Although, the first Ouija film was meant to be absolutely awful, and I was told this by people who aren't even fans of horror films, so people who are a little bit less discerning than myself, let's put it that way, and they kind of said what an absolute piece of shit it was. But yeah, but that turned out to be alright. If you get the right director and the right script, you're alright. So who knows, maybe Annabelle 2 may be a surprise. However, my expectations are set firmly, very low indeed.
Don't blame you. I don't blame you at all.
So yeah, another sequel, Saw Legacy.
Yeah, I love the Saw franchise. I love it, so I will go and see another one. But again, set your expectations low because who knows what they're going to do with this.
Well, the last one came out about 5 years ago, and it was not very good. Let's put it that way. It was really bad. So, I mean, I've seen every single Saw film. Saw is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine, as I'm sure it is many people.
Yeah, me too, but you don't really need to feel guilty about it because I think that it's pretty awesome. So I like the characters.
Well, I don't know. Saw 5 and the last one, pretty shit. I'm not gonna lie. They were pretty fucking bad. But
plenty of...
yeah, I'm sure. I'm surprised that he was dead in more films than he actually was alive, which is quite interesting. I'm quite interested what they're going to do with this because at the end of the last film, Cary Elwes, he was back and looking really, really fat. I have to say, like the whole time, like the other sequels didn't appear. All of a sudden, oh yep, he was there. He's been helping out Jigsaw this whole time. Great. How does that work?
Yeah.
He doesn't even have a foot. He sawed his foot off, and then all of a sudden he's been helping him the whole time. Not quite sure how that's worked out. But now...
So Alien Covenant is coming out, which I've heard good things about, so we've got good expectations for that. World War Z.
Very, very British of you. World War Z 2.
Yeah, the remake, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that one, because I saw it when I was a kid. Because I was the right age. I saw it the first time it was on television. I remember thinking it was really scary, and I saw it again not that long ago, and it was not as good as I remembered. So, who knows?
I saw it when I was young as well. It was one of the first horrors that I saw, and I really liked that film, but it was split into 2 parts, and you had to watch it in 2 parts.
Yeah.
And it was very long if you watch the whole thing, so I'm looking forward to seeing, like, what they can do with better special effects, creepier clown, and making it a bit more concise. I'm intrigued to see what they do with that. We've got, what else? Oh, The Mummy, the Universal, The Mummy.
Yes, not really sure what to think about that.
It looks like it's going to be terrible.
It does look pretty, yeah, I agree. In terms of sort of sequels and remakes that no one asked for, we have Leatherface, which admittedly is directed by the French directors of Inside, which is actually quite an interesting film, but I doubt that this will be any better than the recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre films that have come out, which I have not seen, but I'm reliably informed are absolutely horrible.
Yeah, they were okay. They were just that bit too kind of generic in
Yeah,
terms of movies, like nothing special, but pretty, you get a good kick out watching it because I like horror movies with
you
chainsaws in them.
do. That's your big fetish, isn't it?
I love it. So I will probably see this film because I like Leatherface as a character and I like the theme of the horror movies. But again, low expectations.
Incredibly low expectations, as I would imagine most people have for Friday the 13th. Now, this is meant to have come out for the last couple of years, so this may not even come out this year, but I am not a massive fan of the Friday the 13th. I do admit the films are quite fun, but I don't. I understand why they're doing it, but do we need another Friday the 13th film at this point? I don't think we do.
No, I'm kind of bored of seeing like remakes of that, so not sure if I'll watch it, but perhaps. Rings is coming out, which is another sequel, which it looks intriguing, so I'll probably see that. Oh, my final one that I've just spotted for 2017 that I think I've heard a little bit about it, and I'll probably go to watch it. There's one called The Bye Bye Man.
Which, doesn't sound like a very sort of scary name. It's like Mama. It's like, that just doesn't sound scary at all, but...
it looks intriguing. I think I've seen it trending on Facebook, but some kind of like spoof parody of it.
Right.
So, it says 3 friends stumble upon the horrific origins of the Bye Bye Man, a mysterious figure they discover is the root cause of the evil behind man's most unspeakable acts. It doesn't say what those acts are.
Well, unspeakable, clearly.
Yeah, we can't speak about those acts.
Yeah.
So,
now,
that could be terrible. It could be great. Who knows?
Well, it's coming out at the start of the year, which is never a good sign. If you're a horror film or any kind of horror or sci-fi or big budget film that comes out in January or February, it's normally a sign that the studio doesn't think they're very good, so they just want to bury it. In terms of, how could you forget? I mean, we talked about this on another podcast, Death House.
Death House.
No, let's not talk about that. It's meh. It looked all right. It just looked like the kind of film that gets released at Fright Fest and that doesn't ever come out in cinemas. You probably get it on video on demand. It'll be on Amazon Prime or Netflix this time next year.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm waiting for 2 movies, independent movies, that I was an extra in to come out. Hopefully next year.
Mm-hmm.
One is The Zombie King.
Okay.
With Edward Furlong in.
Oh wow. Did you meet Edward Furlong?
No. I did some green screen for the background, but that's supposed to be coming out soon, so hopefully next year. Corey Feldman's also in that one.
Okay.
Could be good, I'm eager to watch that. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah,
so.
I'm quite interested, like, when you're in a film, obviously if you're the main actor in it, obviously you've probably got a good idea whether it's going to be a good film or not. But if you're like just in a film for like a day or two, do you get an impression as to, even not having seen the final product, whether it's going to be a good film or not? Or you literally, this could be the best or worst thing ever. You're just never going to know.
You have no idea. So as soon as it comes out, I'll be purchasing a copy and watching that. And then the other one is called Welcome to Essex, which is another zombie film that I've been in.
Oh,
so
God.
Hopefully my part wasn't cut from that. I'm working on this, getting into horror films thing, so I might not be in it at all. Who knows?
I've got to say, I imagine they probably didn't need a huge budget for zombie makeup in Essex, because God knows there's enough zombies in Essex sort of as it is. Anyone who's been there will know, and I've been there many times, and it's not my favourite place in the world, let's put it that way.
I think that's even what the storyline is. It's like humorous storyline about some kind of suntan, not suntan lotion,
fake tan.
Fake tan lotion that causes a zombie virus, is what I've heard, but who will know? Until it's the final cut, I don't know if that's true or that's just speculation. So I know that all of Essex gets cordoned off and sealed.
If only real life could reflect the film movies. Okay,
Yeah.
the I would say there's a lot of kind of shitting on films coming out next year. There are a couple of films that are not sequels or remakes that I'm kind of interested in that I just wanted to quickly bring up. There's a film called A Cure for Wellness, which is directed by Gore Verbinski, who is more famous for directing Pirates of the Caribbean, but he did also direct the American remake of Ring, which I thought was only okay, but a lot of people seem to think is amazing. But this looks very interesting. So it's Dane DeHaan, and it appears to be set in like a spa, and it just, I don't know, it just looks kind of quite interesting.
Yeah, it's look interesting. I've looked it up on the 2017 list, and it's American German psychological horror thriller film. You can't go wrong with a name like Gore Verbinski, can you?
Yeah, well, very true. Another film that I'm quite interested in is called Get Out. It's directed by Jordan Peele, who is part of Key and Peele, American comedian duo. He is apparently a big horror film fanatic, and this is sort of a quite one of the things I've talked about before is horror tends to reflect the times that we live in and kind of social issues of the day. This is about a relatively normal situation. It's a couple, guy meeting his girlfriend's parents. She is white, he is black, and kind of tension because it's of that. And again, quite interested to kind of see sort of how that goes. Quite looking forward to that one. And finally, the only other film I would sort of point out is a film called The Love Witch, which is
Yeah, I've heard good things about this.
I've also heard good things about it. It's sort of I don't know, it's not really a pastiche as such. It's kind of a film done in that style, and obviously I'm a huge fan of like 60s and 70s cinema. I think a lot of Italian films that this film is sort of evoking as such.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one.
I thought that already came out in like October or November of this year. However, I hadn't seen any chances to watch it, and I hadn't managed to get hold of a copy of it yet. But that's what I'd heard. But I really love this kind of 60s pulp novel style, and like, the sort of glamorous sort of witchcraft look. So personally, I'm really looking forward to seeing this. I don't know. I presumed it was already released, but I just hadn't managed to access it.
No,
but
it came out in at festivals. This is an issue. There's other films that I'm looking forward to where technically they came out this year, but they won't actually be seen until next year.
I see.
That's what happens with a lot of these independent or sort of foreign horror films. Right, so I think we've come to sort of a good point to kind of close the show off today. So thank you very much. Myself and Ria will be doing a lot more of these kind of shows over, the coming months, years, possibly. Things go really well.
Hopefully we'll be able to summarize 2017 in the same way next year.
Yeah, exactly. So quickly, just at the end of the show, is there anything you would like to plug? You want to plug your shirt?
Yeah, so I'm Ria Fend, alternative model and budding actress. So you can find me online on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter as Ria Fend. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the podcast. So next time, I think I'll take my usual role of counting up how many deaths are in the film, because I like to be body count girl. So let's do that.
Okay, yeah, that's another, anything with chainsaws, anything lots of people die. So they're in there. I am also on Facebook. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm also on Twitter, although I'm not a model. So yeah, if you try and add me on Facebook, I probably won't add you. Sorry. But yeah, thank you very much. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And yeah, I will speak to you again very, very, very soon.
It's been emotional. See you. Cheers, Greg.
It's a very Vinnie Jones way to end it. It's been emotional. Bye, everyone.
Bye.